Our top focus this morning: amid heightened tensions, President of the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, are meeting virtually. The highly anticipated summit is expected to be one of the most extensive meetings under the Biden administration. Washington is hopeful of setting the agenda.
Start more formally, although you and I have never been that formal with one another.
那可能呢，我应该正式一些，尽管我跟你从来都没有虚套。
Good evening to everyone here in the United States, and good morning to you, Mr. President, in Beijing.
我们在美国的同事们晚上好，习主席和中国的同事们早上好，你们在北京。
I'm happy we had found time to meet, and I look forward to a candid and forthright discussions like all the discussions we've had thus far.
那我非常高兴，我们找到这个时间进行这次的视频会晤。当然呢，我期望继续我们好像以前那样的坦诚直率的讨论。
As I've said before, it seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended. Just simple, straightforward competition.
那么就好像以前呢，我也曾经说过的，其实呢，作为美中两国的领导人，也应该做到的，就是我们的责任呢是确保竞争不会滑向冲突，无论是有意的或者是无意的。那么也就是说，我们的竞争呢应该是坦率直接的。
It seems to me we need to establish some common sense guardrails to be clear and honest where we disagree and work together where interests intersect, especially on vital global issues like climate change.
我们需要建立涉及竞争的合乎常理的护栏，清晰坦诚地对待我们之间的分歧，在我们利益交汇的领域一道努力，特别是在诸如气候变化等重大的全球问题上。
None of this is a favor to either of our countries, what we do for one another, but it's just responsible world leadership, and you're a major world leader, and so is the United States.
这样做其实并不是给对方施舍什么恩惠，或者是卖什么人情，而是我们对世界的责任担当。作为两个大国，美国的领导和中国的领导都应该做到这一点。
How our bilateral relationship evolves seems to me will have a profound impact not only on our countries, but quite frankly, the rest of the world.
因为我们之间两个大国之间的关系啊，不单呢是有关于我们两个国家，也有关于世界。
We have a responsibility to the world as well as to our people.
我们的责任不单是对我们各自的两国的人民，也对于世界。
It's why we believe, and you and I have talked about this, all countries have to play by the same rules of the road. Why the United States is always going to stand up for our interests and values and those of our allies and partners.
也就是为什么今天我们在对话的时候啊，我们呢也认识到所有的这个国家呢都必须恪守同样的道路规则。为什么美国永远捍卫我们的利益和价值观，捍卫我们的盟友和伙伴呢？
Past as prologue, I am sure that today we'll be discussing those areas where we have concerns, from human rights to economics to ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific.
也因此呢，我们将讨论存在在我们之间的一些关切的领域，从人权到经济，以及确保一个自由开放的印太地区。
And I think it's very important, as I've told other world leaders when they ask about our relationship, is that we have always communicated with one another very honestly and candidly, and we never walk away wondering what the other man is thinking. And I think that's an important ingredient for this relationship, to be open and candid in terms of our relationship.
那么其实呢，我跟世界不同的领导呢，说到我们两国关系的时候呢，我都说到这一点，也就是说，非常重要的呢，就是对我们的之间的问题，关乎我们双边关系的问题，进行坦诚直接的沟通和讨论。我们从不回避问题，我们在进行对话之后呢，对于各自的想法都是非常清晰的。
And I think it's important we communicate honestly and directly to one another about our priorities and our intentions.
对于我们的当务之急和意图呢，也因此我们有着非常直接坦诚的对话。
I look forward to getting down to business and on the extensive and substantive agenda we have ahead of us, and I thank you very much.
因此呢，我期待着今天晚上跟您着手围绕着广泛而实质的议程展开讨论。我非常感谢您。
And thank you for your congratulatory call when I won the election. It was very gracious of you.
那么同时呢，我要感谢您在我当选的时候给我发来的贺电，那的确是您非常客气。
Thank you.
感谢。
Thank you. Thank you.
感谢，感谢，感谢。
总统先生你好，也向在座的你的同事们问好。今天啊，是我们第一次以视频的方式会晤，当然这个不如直接面对面，但也很不错啊，看到老朋友我感到很高兴。
Good to see you, Mr. President, and your colleagues. It's the first time for us to meet virtually. Although it's not as good as a face-to-face meeting, I'm very happy to see my old friend.
谢谢。
当前啊，中美发展都处在关键阶段。人类是一个地球村啊，我们面临着诸多的挑战。中美作为世界前2大经济体和联合国安理会的常任理事国，应该加强沟通和合作，既办好我们各自国内的事儿，又承担起应尽的国际责任，共同推进人类和平与发展的崇高事业。这是我们中美两国和世界各国人民的共同愿望，也是中美两国领导人的共同使命。
Right now, both China and the United States are at critical stages of development, and humanity lives in a global village, and we face multiple challenges together. As the world's 2 largest economies and permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and the United States need to increase communication and cooperation. We should each run our domestic affairs well, and at the same time, shoulder our share of international responsibilities and work together to advance the noble cause of world peace and development. This is a shared desire of the people of our 2 countries and around the world, and the joint mission of Chinese and American leaders.
推动中美各自发展，维护世界和平稳定的国际环境，包括刚才讲到的有效应对气变、新冠肺炎疫情在内的全球性挑战，都需要一个健康稳定的中美关系。中美应该相互尊重，和平共处，合作共赢。我愿同总统先生一道，形成共识，积极行动，引领中美关系向关系积极的向前发展，这是造福2国人民的需要，也是国际社会的期待。
A sound and steady China-US relationship is required for advancing our 2 countries' respective development and for safeguarding a peaceful and stable international environment, including finding effective responses to global challenges such as climate change, which you referenced, and the COVID pandemic. China and the United States should respect each other, coexist in peace, and pursue win-win cooperation. I stand ready to work with you, Mr. President, to build consensus, take active steps, and move China-US relations forward in a positive direction. Doing so will advance the interests of our 2 peoples and meet the expectation of the international community.
下面我也愿意与总统先生就全局性的问题全面广泛的开展交流。谢谢。
I now look forward to a wide-ranging and comprehensive discussion with you, Mr. President, on overarching issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
感谢。
记者们走了。
We've heard the opening statements from President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping as well. Both have called for open and candid talks. President Xi, as we heard, also went on to say that he was very happy to meet his old friend and said that they were at critical stages of development and they faced multiple challenges together. This has set the tone for how the meetings will progress now going forward and also for future negotiations. However, up until now, we've only heard the opening statements. The meeting has formally commenced and we will see how this goes on. Of course, we will be tracking this very closely. President Biden has called for open and candid talks, and so has Chinese leader Xi Jinping. These are the two largest economies of the world, and they aim to, by these talks, increase cooperation and communication. We're now being joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani from New York with the latest updates. Susan, thank you for joining us. Now, we've heard the opening statements. How do you assess their statements? President Joe Biden has called for open and candid talks. President Xi Jinping has also said that the two world's largest economies need to now increase communication and cooperation. How do you think this sets the tone for the talks going forward?
You know, just like their preliminary statements, I think Xi's comments were a lot more broad-based, but something that President Biden alluded to even in his opening statement was what he said he was looking forward to, and the fact that all member states of the international community play by the rules. International rules, norms, and regulations, and I think that that's something that the United States moves forward in these discussions and wants to set the tone with, calling on China to start playing by the rules and playing by international rules and regulations. Remember, the United States goes into these talks as China really is imposing intellectual property theft on the one hand, forced technology transfer, cyber hacking, dumping, predatory state-owned enterprises. That's a grave sin. Currency manipulation. And then we also have something that's happening on the southern border here that's not talked about much, and the distribution to Americans of deadly fentanyl that's coming from China, that's being manufactured here in the United States in recreational drugs and other drugs being used as well. So, you know, these are huge issues on the table, apart from the issue of Taiwan and what's happening in the South China Sea in those waters. And the international aspect of this situation, the trade, commerce and tariff issue will definitely be on the agenda, and how China is not playing by the rules is probably the tone that I think President Biden wanted to set forth even in his opening remarks. And of course, you know, saying thank you to Xi for congratulating him on becoming president, alluding to the fact that they knew each other years before.
Right, absolutely, Susan. On the topic of playing by the rules, we know that the issue of Taiwan and human rights abuses in China is going to come up. How do you see United States bringing up this issue, and what sort of a reaction are we expecting? We know that there is no expectation of a joint statement or a resolution just yet, but just on these issues that have been a bone of contention for quite some time right now.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, the United States says that it wants to go into these meetings. First of all, the issue of Taiwan is very important for Xi. He's definitely going to bring it up. But for the United States as well, it's going to go in these talks with a position of strength. But also, I think it wants to make clear also its position on strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan. A few weeks ago, there was some flip-flop on where the United States stands hands in regards to Taiwan when President Biden made statements on the one hand saying that if Taiwan was attacked, it would go to the aid of Taiwan, and then the White House and the Defense Department sort of backtracked that and said that we still believe in the one China policy. But on the other hand, the United States is extremely concerned at the aggressive measures that China is taking against Taiwan and in the South China Sea in general, with its nuclear missile tests on the one hand and basically hypersonic armed conflict, if you may, just readying that in the Taiwan Strait on the other. So I think it's going to make very clear that while it doesn't want to see any conflict in that regard, it may be ready to defend its ally, and it has the alliances that it needs. It's prepared for some kind of confrontation of that sort if it does happen. On the issue of human rights, the United States has made clear that it's going to carry on with calling on China regarding the Uyghurs and other minorities in China, and also the violations that it's been carrying out elsewhere as well. Beyond China's borders. And I think while Xi hopes and would want the United States to mind its own business in this regard, the United States is not going to turn a blind eye. And for one other reason is because of the problems that Joe Biden is facing at home as well. The Republican front wants Joe Biden to hammer in on China's human rights violations because it can use it as a leverage point when it comes to the supply chain crisis and again the aggressive policies that's been carrying out not only on intellectual property and hacking and its cybersecurity violations, but also on currency manipulation as well. Right. So those issues are definitely going to be on the table, and all eyes will be on Joe Biden to see how serious he's going to be in these discussions.
Right. All right, Susan, thank you so much for joining us with all the latest on that. We will, of course, continue to monitor this very closely with you. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.